What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan the Valley coming at you with some more hoops talk. Before we get started, we're going to discuss, Lakers, Raptors, and Bulls on this podcast. So I highlighted. I set off to do one team, and I have like 80 windows open now and did a bunch of research and notes trying to decide which team to focus on. I'm just going to focus on all three because they're all pretty topical. Anywho, if you have not already, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you get it. If you're on YouTube, hit that sub button right now. It would mean a lot. Like, comment, help the algorithm love us back. Also, if you're listening to us for the first time on audio, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever, subscribe, download every episode. Give us some allegiance. You'll have fun around here. Very seriously unserious. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Follow us on all the socials. Those are in the YouTube and podcast descriptions as well. Really trying to build up Instagram and TikTok at the moment, in addition to, Twitter, obviously, and YouTube. But follow us everywhere. And if you've done all those things, recommend us, word of mouth, shout outs on Twitter, retweet our promos, tell people about us. Anything you can do to help us continue to grow the community. But shout out to everyone who continues to come back and has listened from not just day one, but trickled on and stayed with us. We appreciate you, as I try to say at the top of every podcast for the most part. Let's get into some talk here. Let's begin with, we'll go with the Lakers just because we only talk about Lakers on the podcast, anyone who is familiar with us, but just a little bit topical with the AD right foot injury that he suffered over the weekend. Initially, World Cup news dump, the Lakers said he was going to be out a month, but then it came out that it could be indefinitely. And then Brian Windhorst on the Hoop Collective podcast Monday said, it's not good. It's not a sprained ankle. It's not a sprained foot, from what I understand. It's something a little more concerning than that. Maybe we'll know by the time I'm even recording this podcast, or that it's out and you're listening to it. That's no bueno for the Lakers. It's fucking terrible. Is really they're able to beat the Wizards without him on Sunday, but it's the Wizards. So Anthony Davis this sucks because Anthony Davis is playing probably the best basketball of his career, if not close to it. Kind of a finite stretch. So if you didn't want to say it was the best basketball of his career, but just looking at the way that he was hitting some really difficult shots and just creating for himself, the chemistry that he built up with Russell Westbrook, it's a blow. It's a monstrous blow. And now we pivot. Russ didn't play in I didn't see the Wizards game, but Russ didn't play in the Wizards game, I believe. He and LeBron without AD on the court, they're up to a minus 1.6 points per 100 possessions this season. Just something to monitor. I think you're in a situation now with Russ and AD had developed some really nice chemistry when LeBron wasn't on the court. Now those minutes are just Russ and Thomas Bryant. And so the Lakers, specifically on the offensive end this year, when Thomas Bryant and LeBron have played together without Anthony Davis, they're pumping in 122.9 points per 100 possessions. So the offense has been fine. The defense has been in the 51st percentile. They've been mainly surrounded by Austin Reeves and Lonnie Walker, and then they rounded out with some sort of guard in there. Maybe it's Russ. That lineup has not been good. Maybe it's Dennis Schroeder at this point. Patrick Beverley could be sprinkled in there, but it seems like, the crux of your main lineup now is going to be your best lineup, I should say, is Walker, Reeves, James, and Bryant. I think also by extension, if Bryant's able to space the floor, that's not, he's not a proxy for AD, but that's at least opening up the floor in the front court. He's not going to replace anything that Anthony Davis does on defense, which is certainly going to be a problem, but at least opening up the floor in the half court for a guy like, let's say, Lonnie Walker, who I think, and you could say this for Russ too, but Lonnie Walker becomes more important because of his creation and ability to put pressure on set defenses. So you look at him and LeBron as maybe driving forces of this offense. It probably makes Dennis Schroeder a little bit more important to this team as well too. So I don't know that the Lakers are just going to be able to survive this stretch without Anthony Davis because we don't necessarily know how long it's going to last. If it's a month, I mean, that's a long enough time. I said the Warriors would probably be done if Steph is going to wind up missing a month. It's supposed to be a few weeks. We'll see what happens. Lakers are 13-16, 12th place. They're right there. I mean, they're one loss back of the play-in as I'm recording this. That's not the end of the world, but the Western Conference, you just don't, I mean, this season really don't have any margin for error. What's also impactful here, or this will impact how the Lakers approach the trade deadline, I would imagine. LeBron was asked about this on Sunday, and he said that's a question for Pelinka, but that he's going to want them to trade the picks probably more than ever now, just to supplement the help. But you're also in this weird conundrum at the same time where it's like, well, you don't have Anthony Davis. What is the target via trade The Buddy Hield Miles Turner one with Russell Westbrook makes a little bit more sense now, maybe because you don't have AD right away, especially if you could miss an indefinite amount of time, but also makes less sense because of how important Russ has become off the bench, and his shot creation has all of a sudden been a boon for this team. I can't remember who first pointed that out on Twitter. I want to say it was Jackson Frank. Um, but I hope I'm not misciting that. And that was a great point, is that you just can't throw Russ away willy-nilly. There's a trade that Grant and I will talk about on a separate podcast that might make more sense for the Lakers because you're getting shot creation in there. And if you're going to give up Russ, that's what you have to do. Otherwise, you might just be better off leaning into shooting and seeing like, well, can we take on the last year of Buddy Hield's deal and we'll just use like the Nunn Beverly package to do that. Like that could be a route for them to go. And maybe the Pacers are more amenable if they don't want to pay Hield next season. But so it's one, the question becomes, are they more or less likely to move the picks now? And I think they're less likely just because it seemed like they were sort of circling the drain on scenarios there to begin with, or at least maybe waiting for some to crop up closer to the February 9th deadline. And maybe that could always happen where there's this no-brainer scenario that we're just not even considering right now. And maybe Bradley Beal demands a trade or something in January. And, then, you go and get Bradley Beal. But as of now, it just feels less likely because AD is slated to miss at least a month, in which case, look, by the time he gets back, the Lakers will definitely be better than the Spurs and the Rockets in the West. And that's really the only team you could be confident in saying they'll be better than. I mean, Minnesota is won games without Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns at this point. The Warriors, they beat the whatever version of the Raptors is now without Steph. So that's whatever there. But maybe you could, if the Warriors sort of trail off, you still do have LeBron James, who's been quietly really good recently for LeBron James. That's such a weird thing to say, but it also feels like we're not talking enough about for some reason. Shea just hits a game winner, and it feels like we all of a sudden stopped talking about him before that. Anthony Edwards has been playing really well, hasn't really been seeing a lot of attention, and LeBron has been playing really well. It just doesn't feel like those three are receiving enough attention. Shea at least got it at the top of the season, and then Edwards had it for kind of the wrong reasons at the beginning of the season. I digress. Does this change the calculus, though, if you are deciding to move the picks? Is the question I'm more interested in, because I just think they're not going to now at this point, and that you're just going to sit tight. Or maybe, again, like the Beverly Nunn second round pick something. What does that get you, if anything? Maybe they explore that. Does this make you more inclined to be, okay, well, given AD's injuries, it's not just about shot creation. We need a big in here too. And so is there a way do you start looking at, you can get Miles Turner with the Nunn Beverly package if you're including the picks as well. If the Pacers don't have to take on Russ and you're still giving the picks, or you're giving both picks, I think they're not going to trade Miles Turner for one first round pick. I'd be shocked if they did that. If it was two, and that's the package is built around the non-Russ, you can't ask for compensation for those expiring contracts. They're just smaller. Even Russ at this point, it's different because his contract is so large. Even if he's been playing a lot better, you can't just reroute him, and any team that's acquiring him is not acquiring him to keep him. And so that's why there's some level of compensation involved in getting off his expiring contract at this point. You could explore that scenario, but does it make sense? Okay, now we have Miles Turner, then when AD comes back, and that should work, we can close with both of them. But if something happens to AD again, that's how we have Miles Turner. But is there almost a hollowness in doing that now? If AD is going to miss 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you just have a chance to not to still miss not just the playoffs, but the play-in tournament. And that's the dilemma the Lakers are in. So I would not expect them to move the picks, but I would expect this to change the calculus in the event that they do. That it's either going to be now, more so than it was before, a star became available, or we might even see this skew. Okay, maybe it's one, and I'm not saying both the picks, but maybe it's one pick, and they're just we really need to fortify some of our front court depth here because something always happens to Anthony Davis. It's never the same injury, but his chronic injury is getting injured at this point. And it's a blow to the Lakers because he was playing so great. You never want to see anyone get injured, but he was, I didn't have him in my MVP discussion just yet. I was probably waiting to see how he played a little bit longer. And also, would the Lakers be relevant enough for him to continue playing at that level for an extended period of time? Who knows there? So the Lakers are just fascinating from that perspective. I find them very I'm not interested in them as a basketball team as much now without Anthony Davis on the court. I am still kind of intrigued, can LeBron lead them through this stretch? And what happens if he does? If LeBron is winning basketball games for you with this group, or if this group is just winning basketball games for you without Anthony Davis, that's probably going to put more pressure on you to then move those picks because, we get Anthony Davis back. And if we could get player or players who actually help and deepen this rotation, perhaps we could make some noise in the Western Conference, especially if there's pullback in Dallas or Minnesota or Golden State with Steph being out. That's where I'm at on the Lakers, though. Let's go to the Chicago Bulls, who led up 150 points on Sunday to the, to the shorthanded Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, my God, Zach LaVine called it embarrassing. The Bulls have lost a whole bunch of games lately. Over their past 20 games, they are 9-11. No, they're 11. The Bulls are, over their last 20 games, 6-14, and they are 20th in offense, 22nd in defense. They feel like a clusterfuck at this point in the worst possible way. And I don't really know how to go about fixing them. And a lot of people have put them on blow up watch. I'm reticent to say teams should blow it up. I'll talk about it. I enjoy talking about it, but what does blow up mean? Let's go into specific. Like, you can't just blow up a roster in theory. You need to find takers for the players you're trying to move, and the moves need to make sense for you. That being said, Brian Windhorst again did say on the Hoop Collective, it's going to be something that's going to be discussed more and more. The Bulls' downfall. I think you're going to see some Bulls stuff coming here. They could wait a little longer, but they also could take advantage of the fact that there are no sellers right now. And if they were to sell, they may be able to do well in the market. I think we may be seeing that discussed a lot more coming up. I agree with him in the sense that I think sellers, if they're willing to act early, might be able to get more since they're allowed to set the market, and there are other teams that tend to wait around. But I don't know what a teardown looks like for this team, or I guess we know what it looks like. I don't know if they're going to be ready to go that route. I think they'll look at the top 4 protected pick they owe to Orlando and think that they're doing the Magic more of a service than themselves. At this point, I think you need to write it off as a sunk cost. Maybe you finish with a bottom 4 record, gives you about a coin toss of keeping that pick, and perhaps you keep it. But if you don't, it's just there's value in, okay, well, who did we move and what did we get for them? Does Vooch have any value as an expiring contract? I honestly don't know. I think Zach Lowe was talking to Sarah Kustok on his podcast about could they get like a first and a prospect for him or something. And I even thought that was from the Nets. And I just even thought that was like, or 2 rotation players and a pick or something. I even thought that was a high cost for Vooch, who's been better this year and stretches the floor. But I just don't know that he's someone, especially headed towards free agency, you give up real value for. Perhaps if you're getting off a contract you don't want, that'd be something to consider. There's DeMar DeRozan. That's an arrow's cropped up specifically with the Lakers. He'll have value. He still remains, per unpredictable, one of just the most overwhelmingly valuable clutch players in the league this season. So there's, he's definitely someone who I think would garner value. I don't know, is he going to get you 2 first-round picks? Probably not. He ranks first, by the way, in unpredictables clutch probability added as I record this. So win probability added, excuse me. But you could move him. Zach LaVine would be the big one. That's the guy that I look at and say, okay, well, they are blowing it up. He has 4 years and $178.1 million left on his deal. He's just looked off, especially lately, and his defense has been bad. Chicago sometimes, as Joe Cowley actually absolutely went in on him in a recent article after that loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I don't think it's just LaVine who is culpable. I think that this is just an issue of a team that was kind of built around like, no, you weren't going to protect the basket, and they're not. Like, they're not doing a good job of that with Vooch, with Andre Drummond. But their defense has just been such a disaster because they don't have the same level of disruption as they had last year when you had Caruso and Lonzo for together for at least a stretch, unlike this season where Lonzo's yet to play. And now Caruso's kind of just out there on his own. I think Ayo Dosunmu maybe has slipped a bit defensively. Not having Javonte Green in the game against the Timberwolves really hurt them, and so it leaves Caruso sort of on this island. The Bulls have just been like, I don't want to even say hit or miss. It's mostly been missed, but like, this is not a team that you can trust to do anything when it comes to their transition defense. They have one of the bottom 5 during this stretch where they are 6-14. They have one of the bottom 5 half-court defenses, which is like bad in itself. They are, they're not letting up a lot of second chance opportunities, but teams were just hitting their first shots. And when you get to transition, like, nope, Chicago is bottom 5 there as well during this stretch. And they're not a team that you trust to get back on defense after they commit a turnover. They're not a team that you even trust to go and get set after these live rebounds, after they miss a shot. And so when you're not even going to be able to do that, like the baseline level of, okay, let's get back on defense during these live balls, And then you're just going to kick in the fact that they're just fouling a ton right now. I think they were close to bottom 10 in foul rate during this 6-14 stretch. It gets super tough, and you're not built to fix it because it's okay. Who is your defensive fulcrum? It's Alex Caruso and his hustle, his ball pressure. But like, you need someone below him to depend on. And Patrick Williams, as an isolation defender, like, yeah, sure, but like, is sort of just a team disruptor. No, that's where you, and I can't even say you miss Lonzo Ball since he's not going to play like below that. But when you have two of Caruso and Ball on the court at once, that certainly makes a difference. Yeah, having a healthy Javonte Green, like, that can make a difference too. But it's not going to be Vooch. It's not going to be Drummond. Billy Donovan had a quote. I can't remember where it was from, where he was kind of just bemoaning that he can change the defensive coverages all he wants, but like, guys just aren't engaged and they're just getting beat. And I think you can see it. I mean, you can see it in all facets of the Bulls defense if you watch them for a minute. And I think Stefan Noe of Sporting News had a really good thread on this on Twitter the other day too. But there's just like, they just look languid. It's inertia on the defensive end. And like I said, the transition defense lately has not even been like their worst spot, but it just feels egregious on how they can't even get set after live balls to even get beat in that scenario in the half court. So this team, and when you're dealing with those issues, and like, yeah, you have these talented offensive players and you're still floating around the bottom 10 in offensive efficiency during this 20-game stretch, that's an issue too. And so it becomes a matter of where do you go to fix things if you wanted to right the ship this season? And I don't know. This is a team that I just don't have a feel for what they're going to do or how they would even go about fixing it. Like, I can direct what I would do, and that is I would probably tear it down and say, fuck the obligations to the pick that we have for Orlando. Let's get that out of the way then. But let's start fresh. I don't think the ownership, the front office, is going to want to do that. Everything they've done, over the past couple of years implies the opposite. That Vooch trade just, I think, sort of accelerated everything that happened after that. When you look at the DeRozan trade, going after a bunch of win now players and treating yourself as just sort of this quasi contender or someone who's on the cusp of it when you really weren't. But I do think, are we having a different conversation if Lonzo Ball is healthy? Maybe, but that is the reality of the situation right now. And I'm not saying trade Lonzo Ball for peanuts, but like, you kind of have to recalibrate here in some way. But I don't know where to begin because I feel like there's so much wrong, and I don't know how to fix. Yeah, the Bulls need to take more threes, and they need more shooters on this team. But like, you can go acquire a shooter, but that's not going to fix your defensive issues unless that shooter also happens to be like an amazing defender. And so the other problem is like, you could kind of use an upgrade, or you need an upgrade on your front line defensively. But if you're going to move Vooch for that, are you really using Vooch, who is a valuable player, to upgrade at his position? And what's the equity you're including to do that at this point? And it's probably player based, just because you owe your 2023 pick to the Magic and your 2025 pick to the Spurs. And so like, you couldn't trade a first round pick before Kingdom Come at this point. So what are you doing? And who is the target? And like, yeah, you could attach Patrick Williams to somebody, but then like, who are you getting? Like, you need it. They're in such a weird spot that I don't see a pathway to them even being able to make this impact trade. If anyone has ideas that they think they have a trade that solves more than one of the Bulls' issues, you feel free to get at me with it. But this team just feels formless right now. I think that's the best way to put it. I do think if Zach LaVine starts playing better, hitting more, I don't know if he looks slower this year, but I think he's going to start, and even like his shooting percentages, we've seen players shoot worse than this, but like, by his standards, he could be hitting a higher clip of the shots that he's taking. And so you expect that to come up eventually. And so between him and DeRozan, like, could you be okay with where the Bulls are at on offense? They're able to open the floor a little bit more with the way that Vooch has been shooting this year. Sure. Defensively, it's tougher. And I still think even with that setup, it can be a slog offensively for them at times. And so you still need the supplementary shooting on this team. And I just don't know. I honestly don't know where they're supposed to go from here. Again, I know what I would do, but knowing their MO, which is not to, to tear it down or rebuild, like they wanted to have this quick turnaround. I don't see what the next course is for them. And it's that terrible podcasting to not have a solution here, but even they can't even find like the right starting unit. Like, all of their most lineups are just their most used or most popular lineups. So many of them are just getting absolutely trucked at the moment. And so that gets a lot harder. And my point there is, so Lonzo Ball, say he just came back. Like, let's just say Lonzo Ball came back. Yeah, he takes care of the 3-point shooting, the 3-point volume, some of your defensive issues. this is not just a matter of, oh, Lonzo Ball isn't here, and that's why the Bulls are where they are. There's just something fundamentally, inherently, incurably flawed about the makeup of this roster right now. And I think if you were going to aim to fix it this season, you're looking at making a bunch of trades, probably mortgaging the future for more so than you already have, for a return that wouldn't even be ideal. And they are one of my, I think we'll do a podcast on like the most fascinating teams entering the trade deadline or something, but I am watching them just because they feel like a team that could be forced to, just because they're losing by so much. I would be shocked, and I'll phrase it this way to close up on the Bulls, if they go full throttle into the teardown. If they move, I could see them moving two of Vooch and DeRozan, and then like of Vooch, DeRozan, and LaVine, and I just wouldn't bet on it being LaVine. And I'd be curious to see his trade value based off how he's played the season, history of it, like the knee issues in his rear view. 4 years and 178.1 million left on his deal. Would you rather have him or Bradley Beal's contract? Yeah, him. He's slightly younger. I think his. Bradley Beal's been better when he's healthy defensively this year, but he's just, LaVine is cheaper. So I'd just be curious, like, is now even the time to tear down, because you're getting pretty good value for DeRozan. Who else, though? Like, Patrick Williams he feels hit or miss on offense. Like, he'll start to figure some things out, or he'll shoot really well from three, but it's not on high enough volume. And then he'll play really good, like, defense for a few possessions, but then feel like he's lost if he's not able to just zero in on the ball. There's just so much weird about this team when looking at their individual stocks. I think at the moment, you could probably get, let's say, DeRozan might be here's the real question. Of all the players on the roster, who is at the peak of their trade value? There'd be DeRozan, and peak is sort of a relative term here. I know he's in his age 33 season, but let's say like you would get good value for him, that you would be comfortable moving him. And I would say Caruso, maybe, who's quietly, just by the way, during this stretch, averaging, everyone sit down, a whopping 4.2 field goal attempts per game. Fewer than two of which are coming inside the arc. But those two players, yeah, you're confident you could get like net positive, but a value that you're, excuse me, as I whack my microphone all over the place, you're comfortable that you could get, that waiting wouldn't improve their value. Like, we're going to trade, their value is probably not going to get much higher than it is right now. With LaVine, maybe even with Vooch, you feel that way because you think there's nowhere to go but down. But like LaVine and Vooch and even Patrick Williams and Ayo Dosunmu and definitely Kobe White at this point, like they're not, and Lonzo Ball for sure, you're not going to get, like, there's value in thinking, oh, well, if we hold on to some of these guys, maybe they'll improve their trade value. But maybe that's wishful thinking when it comes to a Patrick Williams. It could be definitely wishful thinking when it comes to Vucevic. I think it's fine to think that way with LaVine and Ball specifically, and that's kind of why I wouldn't expect them to go full throttle here. And so if you told me to pick let's set the over-under at 1.5 of them moving Vooch, DeRozan, Caruso, LaVine, and Lonzo this season, I'm not gonna throw Patrick Williams in there because I just don't think he gets moved as part of a sell job. I think that maybe Ayo Dosunmu, that's someone you move to make a consolidation trade or to make an improvement to your roster. So stick with those five guys. I'm going to set the over-under at 1.5 of DeRozan, LaVine, Lonzo, Vooch, and Caruso. Did I say that? DeRozan, LaVine, Vooch, Caruso, and Lonzo. Yeah, those five, 1.5. I'd take the under. That's just the amount of faith I have in the Bulls front office. And I'm not saying they need to sell low on Lonzo. I wasn't like including his name to make that easier. I wouldn't trade him now either. If you're going to tank anyway, like let's just see how healthy he gets next season. Can he help your team? Can he improve his own trade value? So throw him out of there and let's set the other four players at 1.5. I'm taking the under anyway. Like, that doesn't really matter there. So Bulls panic meter, incredibly high for me. Finally, the Toronto Raptors. Speaking of panic meters that I didn't see us having to gauge, I guess, at any point this season, someone had asked and on YouTube whether the Toronto Raptors should blow it up. We did it in a mailbag. Both Grant and I came out here preaching patience, caution, saying it was too soon. We both look a little bit foolish now, and I certainly feel a little bit foolish for dismissing the notion that they would ever do it. I'm still not convinced that they will do it. Let me make that clear. But like, they have earned like the talk of, oh, are they going to blow it up? They've absolutely earned that. They lost another game on Monday night to the Philadelphia 76ers. It was at least close, but that now makes 6 straight. And the pathway to this team, yeah, you could point to some absences. They're 2-9 though over their last 11, and like OG Anunoby missed some of that time. Pascal Siakam played all of those games, but he was working his way back from I think it was an adductor injury, or is that OG had an adductor injury? They both have an adductor injury. I can't keep up with all these injuries. I do try my best there, though. So, like, yeah, you've dealt with some absences, like getting nothing from Otto Porter this year. Like, that has to really hurt. But this 11 game stretch has sort of been a microcosm of all the issues that we were worried about manifesting into one just giant shitstorm for this team. And I think it's fair now to wonder, well, should they go a different direction here? They are, during this 11 game stretch, actually better when I was looking at it, because watching them, you wouldn't think that. They were 18th in offensive efficiency. That was shocking. 22nd in defense. Their half court offense, it's a mess. It's just a mess. They are, during this stretch, they're 24th, but they're 29th in half court offense on the season. They're not like they can still get some second chance points, but like during this stretch, they haven't been getting a crap ton of them. And so when you're relying on that, and then you're all of a sudden, okay, you're still really relying on transition, and you've been okay in transition during this stretch, how are you going to generate your half court offense though? Like, you can get out in transition, but if you're not going to be able to have a more dynamic half court offense aside from let's rebound our own misses and really hope that Pascal Siakam can continue to play the way he's playing, and then Fred VanVleet will start hitting shots, it puts you in a conundrum. And they're just, when you watch the way they play, they're not built to play that way. There's only 3 teams who use isolation possessions as a larger share of their offensive touches: Dallas, Philly, and Brooklyn. Those are probably the 3 teams you'd expect, right? Like, maybe you would think like Portland or the Clippers would be in there, but those are the 3 teams you would predict. However, Toronto, despite being 4th in ISO frequency, is 28th in efficiency, 0.78 points per ISO possession. Only the Bucks at 0.72. That's a red flag, by the way. And the San Antonio Spurs are worse in that department. They don't have guys that you can trust hit off the dribble jumpers. And I'm not saying those need to be hallmarks of your offense, but you need to have that option. The Raptors don't. They are shooting their effective field goal percentage on pull-up jumpers this year, 39.8. Only the Spurs and the Lakers have lower effective field goal percentages on pull-up jumpers. That's an absolute disaster. And like, there are some things that you can envision normalizing. Fred VanVleet shooting under 26% from 3 over these last 11 games. Gary Trent Jr. banged up right now. His shot selection even felt like it was, and he wasn't even like one of their bigger issues then, but OG under 30% from 3 during this stretch. Scotty Barnes been all over the place this season. He will have a game like the Nets where everything seems like it's clicking. The processing speed is up there. He's attacking. Looks like he has great touch. Then he'll just have moments. I mean, like the Sixers, I think it was, I can't remember if it was in overtime, but like he just chucked up like this floater that missed everything. And so there needs to be a level of patience with him because he is in his second year. And so like, I'm not, deboarding the Scotty Barnes bandwagon, but like, when you can't count on him to be this supremely net positive player, and then that's on top of just not having enough reliable on ball options in the half court or enough shooting, they're in the bottom 5 of 3-point shooting frequency and accuracy. And that's a whole nother issue. The bench probably been a little bit better than last season when you're looking at the numbers, but not something you could rely on. We have Nick Nurse turning to Malachi Flynn all of a sudden because he's so desperate. And then there's the defensive energy too. Like, this is a team where we probably, I think we oversell like the collective need for the, like, oh, go ahead and trade for a big, but like the Raptors need a big. The whole like, club 6'7" and 6'9" thing, it might allow you to switch, but Nick Nurse feels like he's like not even trusted that as much. And the Raptors haven't been as good as that. We've seen a lot of lazy closeouts from them. We've even seen them, like, their transition defense has been disappointing a lot of the time during this stretch. So I don't know how you look at this team and think, right, well, they need someone who can end defensive possessions by grabbing boards, but then also help them with their rim protection because they're 28th in rim protection. Opponents are shooting over 70% against them at the rim. And then you look at just like their overall defensive metrics, like they're built to be better than they are on defense. When you look at the season long numbers, they're 15th and 15th per cleaning the glass. It's not like it doesn't paint this dire situation, but the Raptors have like one of the 7 worst location effective field goal percentages allowed for the season. And they've probably actually been a little bit better now that I'm looking at the splits during this stretch where they've just gotten absolutely trucked. But on the season, they've given up like threes. They've given up looks at the rim. So there needs to be like maybe a fundamental change in their defense. Can they afford to be less aggressive at points? Like, could that be something that they could really look at? But yeah, they're 29th in location effective field goal percentage, which is basically what would you expect opponents to shoot based on where you're allowing your shots from? And because they are allowing they allow a bunch of threes and a bunch of looks at the rim, like they are 29th in that category. That's another red flag. So there are so many red flags with this team. What is interesting and what I still do believe is that they feel like they're closer to being able to possibly fix it than, or at least upgrade from the outside rather than just, hey, tear it down. And maybe they do straddle those two lines where it's, or not try to upgrade, but like you could see them moving Fred VanVleet because they don't want to pay him and Gary Trent Jr., but you keep Siakam, Barnes, and uh, OG Anunoby. I think blowing it up would constitute moving Pascal Siakam. And he's probably, I mean, if we did an all NBA ballot right now, he would be on mine, I think. So why are you just going to move him when you have that type of a player? And if you still do believe in Scotty Barnes, I also think there's a misconception where, and, Rome 8180 had pointed this out in our Discord that he disagrees, that the Raptors wouldn't move OG Anunoby because couldn't they trade him to get as part of a buy play? And I think he's right in that sense. If I'm missing his point, if his point was something else, I definitely could see them moving him as part of a buy. I think they would strive not to, but are we sure they're going to buy? And then if they're not going to buy, are we even sure that they're going to sell? Like, are they just going to try and float this thing into the offseason? I will say, I think that if they were able to get like a mid-end shot creator to help their half-court offense, it would go a long way. I also think that they don't need to get caught up with, as I was saying before, I think we overestimate how much value size can be sometimes, but I also think we overvalue, like, well, how does this guy match up against Joel Embiid in the playoffs? Worry about that when you actually match up with Joel Embiid. This is all to say, I'm not really ready to talk about Raptors teardown trades yet because I can't envision them being there imminently. So I feel like the conversation to be had about, oh, where would they trade Fred VanVleet or where would they trade Pascal Siakam? That has to happen another day. And I don't think they're actually tearing it down unless they do really entertain Pascal Siakam trade talks. He's playing at an all NBA level right now. I think you kind of owe it to your organization to see, like, well, is there anything we could do that's not ultra disruptive to the future, maybe still optimize this team? And it's, can you make a lower end upgrade and see if that injects some life where it's not, oh, Christian Koloko is really our only big that we can lean on. Rashawn Holmes is floating around out there in Sacramento. Can you look at getting another, floor spacing secondary shot creator? Is Atlanta, knowing that they're in sort of tax dump mode, like why not sniff around John Collins or also like Bogdan Bogdanovic? That's someone who could really help them. I think Bojan Bogdanovic could probably really help the Raptors as well, too. No, he's not going to do anything for their defense at this point, but like you need to address one thing at a time. And maybe is there like a Noel Bogdanovic deal to be hashed out there? They would have to have interest in Gary Trent Jr., and then you have other money going out. I think Eric Gordon is someone who could really help this team. So I think that they have options. Now, do you go out and immediately do that if you see like you can't really right the ship from within? Maybe not, but I still think even if the Raptors tear it down, I've seen too much of OG Anunoby talk in there. Barnes and Anunoby, I imagine, would be the two players that would be close to off limits. I would imagine Barnes is off limits in a non-superstar trade, and that they look at OG Anunoby as, yeah, we're eventually going to have to pay him, but he's still sort of plug and play, and his offensive decision-making can be all over the place. And again, he looks a little bit like sluggish coming back from that adductor injury. But I think that those are the two. If you're rebuilding, those are the two you keep. And so I see all these teams lusting after OG Anunoby. There's a reason why, and which is why I don't think the Raptors would move him. Now, if they were Kevin Durant becomes available again, or if star to be determined that I can't envision is on the trade market and they decide to go out and get him, yeah, I think that OG Anunoby could be on the table, but moving him feels counterintuitive to the rebuild. Just because you have to pay him, that's not scary. He could be movable on his next deal. Like that's just the cap is going up. He could sign his deal like right as that's happening, basically, or just before it's happening. They'll have a better sense of that market, and it's not like he's entering free agency this summer. That's an issue that you have to sort of grapple with. Not sort of. That's an issue you have to grapple with regards to Fred VanVleet, with regards to Gary Trent Jr. It's not that imminent with OG Anunoby. And so I would expect this team to probably ride it out. If I were the Raptors, I'd probably try and see if I could hit like a single or a double as a means to like, okay, we didn't give up any huge equity. So if this doesn't work out, we need to pivot. But I think that there are steps that can be taken specifically to improve the half court offense that doesn't necessarily involve acquiring a superstar. Like, let's just get someone who could hit a pull up jumper. And yeah, that's easier said than done. But again, Bojan Bogdanovic is floating around out there, and he's someone who could help your team. I actually think Bogdan Bogdanovic would be perfect for them. I just don't know how willing the Hawks would be to listen right now, given their aspirations. They'd probably certainly listen for John Collins, especially if it's Gary Trent Jr. centered around it. That could be a route you go, though. Just hope John Collins helps with your rebounding and then gives you another sort of screening, but also floor spacing outlet in the half court if you believe that that's something that can open up what you're trying to do. What's odd, though, is that if you trade Gary Trent Jr., you do sort of miss when he's healthy what he would bring. Even if you can be maddened by his shot creation and him taking too many gambles on defense, that type of player, someone else who can put the ball on the floor from the outside in, or is confident enough to take those shots and give you some volume, you kind of need that. And so then getting rid of him and flipping him into a big, you would really have to trust that OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, and Scotty Barnes are going to be the answers for you on the perimeter this season, or that you're going to get more out of like that. Otto Porter Jr. is going to stay healthy. You're going to get more of him. Or Precious Achiuwa is going to come back and you're going to get more of that from him. I would expect to see him remain patient. Remains to be seen whether that's the right call, but I don't think we're at blow up mode yet. And I want to caution, just because they trade Fred VanVleet, who I think might be him and Gary Trent Jr. the two most likely to be traded, it's the Pascal Siakam future I'm looking at. If they show a willingness to entertain offers, they are blowing it all to hell. And I'll be shocked if, as part of the sell, they wind up moving OG Anunoby. So this is a team that we're probably going to focus on. We'll do our trade deadline previews or primers eventually. And there are a lot of, we can get into more nitty gritty targets, but for now, should the Raptors blow it up? I have no idea. Dude, I would lean no still. I'm still leaning no. Do I think they're going to blow it up? I ultimately do not think that they're going to go that route. That'll do it for this podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you're watching or listening for the first time, throw us that permanent subscription. If you've already done so, tell people about us. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube description. Follow us on the socials if you're not already. We will be putting out more organic content. I'm already putting out a few videos of organic content on Instagram and TikTok a week, along with memes on TikTok and Instagram, and even our YouTube community posts, and even on shorts. I'm trying all different sorts of things to continue to grow the community, but also just put more content out there for everyone to consume. Until next time, and as always, I leave you with the shout out to the one, the only, the indelible Frank Ntilikina.